The Exorcist, 1973, is often cited as one of the scariest horror movies of all time, which of course means that some modern viewers who haven't seen it think it's overrated or poorly aged.
Well, I'm here to tell them how wrong they are.
It's not an exaggeration to say that William Friedkin and The Exorcist changed horror movies forever in 1973 when the supernatural horror film, based on William Peter Blatty's 1971 novel, dropped on unsuspecting audiences. It's a masterclass of horror and filmmaking, and it's never a bad idea to remind people why. When I was young, my dad often recounted to me the horror movies he had seen. I wasn't allowed to see anything beyond PG, because who wants a bunch of frightened kids crawling into their parents' bed every night? So to titillate me, he would tell me everything he had seen, and I'll never forget the fear he described he felt when The Exorcist came on cable late one night. I wasn't sure what to expect so many years later when I finally watched, bracing myself for something cheesy and old. Well, loyal Screen Rant reader, it was anything but. The Exorcist is still as unsettling now as it was in 1973. William Friedkin's movie feels as modern as any horror film. The Exorcist is as frightening now as it was for my dad back when it came out, and I defy anyone to watch it with the lights off, late at night, and not feel a creeping dread snake up their spine, or start to see figures out of the corner of their eyes. With so many sequels in the Exorcist franchise, it can be a little confusing going into the film and not knowing what to expect. Is it a slasher? Tense and filled with jump scares? Stuffed with gross practical mayhem? Deeply uncomfortable psychological fare? Well, it's a little bit of everything, as most excellent horror movies are. Is the scariest scene in Hereditary when Charlie, Millie Shapiro, gives a kiss to a telephone pole, or is it when Annie, Toni Collette, slowly comes into focus on Peter's, Alex Wolff, ceiling? Those are very different scares, but they meld and merge to create something frighteningly powerful. In the same way, The Exorcist is never just one type of thing. There's creeping dread, disgusting bile, and some of the most unexpected jump scares in any horror movie. There is a deeply unsettling tone in The Exorcist that has been matched by few other horror movies. The slowly growing horror is suffocating enough, but what takes the movie over the top are the isolated moments of hide-behind-your-pillow terror that happen at the perfect moments in the film. Friedkin knows exactly when you start feeling safe, the moment when you begin to let your guard down, and it's then he throws one of the movie's signature scares your way. Scares that have not aged a day. The scariest scenes in The Exorcist stand up to modern horror. Pop culture has led people to forget how scary the movie is. Regan's, Linda Blair, head spins in The Exorcist. The most disturbing and distressing scenes in The Exorcist have been parodied, copied, and discussed at length since the movie first came out. All of this has had the unfortunate side effect of spoiling the scares, at least for those who haven't seen the movies. They turn into jokes and lose a lot of the context and skill of what makes them so frightening. Maggie Simpson's head spins around in a Treehouse of Horror episode. Jay Baruchel yells, "The power of Christ compels you," in This Is the End, who hasn't projectile vomited at one time or another. While fun, these references could convince some people that the scares in The Exorcist are equally silly. Take Regan's, Linda Blair, head spinning. How can that be scary when a head being twisted is the warm-up trap in a Saw film? If you're like me before I watched The Exorcist, you may have imagined the scene of Regan's head turning being a very slow moment, with a lot of build-up. I imagined she would be shaking on her bed, with her mother or a priest watching, at which point she would stop shaking, and her neck would slowly corkscrew. That, to me, sounded like a traditionally scary horror shot that was probably frightening back in the 70s but would have since lost its power. That's not what happens. Instead, a rapid succession of horrifying imagery caught me off guard again and again until I was completely unprepared for the final scare. First, Chris, Ellen Burstyn, walks in to find Regan violently masturbating with a crucifix. Disturbing and disgusting enough, though perhaps with some shock factor lost to time. What comes next is worse. Chris is thrown to the ground and the camera quickly cuts to a low shot of Regan's large dresser getting pulled toward Chris. It happens so quickly and is so destabilizing that it threw me completely. It's just a dresser, but the speed with which it comes toward the camera is claustrophobic. This is followed by another quick cut to Regan on her bed, and as soon as the camera goes to her, the creaking of her neck starts and her head spins, much, much faster than you would expect. It's deliriously frightening and works on a weird, primal level. That's how the scares in The Exorcist are. They feel unnatural, but still real. You think you have a grip on a scene, then Friedkin shakes you like a bronco, and you're holding on, terrified and delighted, the whole time. The Exorcist proves that horror needs to be taken more seriously as a genre. When done correctly, horror movies are as award-worthy as anything. Father Merrin, Max von Sydow, arrives at the house in The Exorcist. Even separated from its legacy and its scares, The Exorcist is an engaging and thrilling drama that will have even young, modern viewers on the edge of their seats. Because The Exorcist is also a mystery. Decades later, everyone and their devil-possessed mother knows that the demons in The Exorcist are real, but the movie only slowly reveals that fact. For much of the runtime, it's unclear to the characters if Regan is lying, her mother is lying, if Regan is sick, or if Father Karras, Jason Miller, is suffering delusions. This makes for an exceptionally intriguing watch as you try to figure out what each person believes. That's the power of having a director like William Friedkin helming your project. The Exorcist was nominated for 10 Academy Awards and won Best Sound, Regan Neck Creek, for the win, and Best Screenplay, Insert Sound, Regan Neck Creek, for the win. It's movies like The Exorcist that prove horror is not some niche genre. When they are made correctly, with new ideas and techniques, and with a story to tell, they can become something that lasts from 1973 to the present.